if I'm going to blow a place up, I try to make it, someplace that's not real.
Something no one's going to miss.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Two Authors Podcast, an entertaining chat show hosted by best-selling mystery and thriller authors Douglas Pratt and Nicholas Harvey, in lively, humorous and informative conversation with distinguished guests who share their thoughts and experience about forging a successful author career.
Welcome to the show, brought to you by Vellum, the absolute most fabulous formatting solution in the whole wide world.
Yes, and I'm reminded regularly. I've been in it a lot lately, actually.
Me too. I was just looking at some of the cool features, but you can actually add in like a handwritten note into your thing. So if you're doing something kind of, mysterious and you want to show a scrawled note, I think that's kind of cool. It's going to give it some cool visuals.
That's really cool. I actually might need to go back I'm thinking of a book right now where there was a poem in there written by Solomon in Solomon's Well, and that would be an ideal feature for that.
That would be very cool. Yeah. So also really big thanks to all of our new Patreon supporters. I know if you guys haven't checked us out on Patreon, we're adding some really cool, we're calling them nuggets, which is just a chance to look at Nick and I as we tell you something that we think is important.
I think that's the downside for them. But you can just close your eyes or put blinkers on and listen.
We can charge more. Hey, we could just say, if you don't Patreon support us, then we'll absolutely send you videos of us.
Wait a second. You pay more on Patreon and we'll give you the audio only version. You don't have to look at us.
Yeah. No, just kidding. No, it is just a chance to hear some little bonus things that we talk about, and it gives us a chance to come up with some cool talking points, and check us out over there on Patreon. It's in the show notes. But today we have an awesome guest. Our guest today is Gareth Brown, and we're going to chat with him in a minute about his upcoming book. And but first, I think we have a listener question just for you, Nick. Comes from, I think it's for both of us, but I like to make you feel special. This comes from Sandy in Oklahoma, and she asks, when do you use real businesses and locations in your stories, and when do you choose to invent them, and why?
The why is easy. If something bad happens, I don't want to get sued, so I don't want to say it was in a real place. And if something good happens, I love to pimp places that I know about. Especially my book's based in the Cayman Islands, because I have a lot of readers who are divers, who are people that go to Cayman, or that at some point have been there or go there, and I get a lot of notes from folks that, hey, we went by so-and-so, or this was, we found Heritage Kitchen, and it was fantastic. And so stuff like that. So I try and use real places as much as I possibly can. But if, they're going to get food poisoning, you don't want to use the name of a real restaurant.
My reasoning is the same way. I remember when John Grisham wrote The Firm, which was based in Memphis, which is where I live. He made a comment about...
And Cayman. They went to Cayman.
And to Cayman, yeah. So, yeah. But they... one of the comments he made in talking about it was like he would list a few places that were very famous to Memphis, and then he made up a few, and usually that was when he had something, like you said, a little bit negative happens there, so he doesn't want to call them out. I like using real places, and sometimes it does involve a little bit of research. I know you're down in Caymans. I like to go down to Florida, and I went to some places you can't go to, but I do like to bring in as much authenticity to it. And some of these restaurants are part of the culture. If you're...
Well, you did in Puerto Vallarta, right?
In Puerto Vallarta, also in Colombia when I did Cartagena. I kind of use some real places too. People who travel a lot and go to these places and then read your books, because a lot of people do. They're like, I love a book set in Puerto Vallarta. So they're going to look for those books, and they want to see those familiar places. So I think that's important as well. But you do. If I'm going to blow a place up, I try to make it, someplace that's not real.
Something no one's going to miss.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I think that it's got its values. I do think it's important to give it some authenticity. So, but hey, now on to this week's guest. We have the author of the Sunday Times and USA Today bestseller, The Book of Doors. It's Gareth Brown joining us from Bonnie, Scotland, to talk about his upcoming release and a little bit about his craft and process.
Gareth Brown, coming to us from Scotland. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
give us a little background on when you first started getting into writing and when you were actually first published, please.
I think I've wanted to be a writer almost for as long as I can remember, certainly since I was a teenager. Let's say that. I wasn't much of a reader as a child, which is maybe unusual for writers, but I was always into stories. So I would always watch films and TV programs, and I was a bit of a daydreamer. I think I would lie and, tell stories to myself, or do that thing kids do when you're going out play and you're telling stories to yourself. Really, that's what play is telling stories. And then I only ever read the books that school made me read until I was about a teenager. And then one of my friends gave me a Stephen King book, and that was my gateway drug. I sort of got into reading.
That's a great way of starting. Wow.
That's a lot of people's gateway drug right there. It's like somebody said Stephen King.
There's whole generations of writers who are only writers, I think, because of Stephen King, probably. So it wasn't even one of his better books as well. I mean, I love everything Stephen King writes, but there are peaks and troughs, in his back catalogue. But that was the first time I'd read a book off my own back that I really enjoyed, and I wanted to pick it up, and I was sad when it was over, that sort of experience you get of a really good book. And so I just read Stephen King almost exclusively then, and then sort of slightly diversified my tastes into other horror. The small town where I grew up in Scotland had a really good library that had a big horror section. I don't know what that says about small town Scotland, but there was a really rich horror section in the library. So I would walk down to the library once a week, and I would get the latest Stephen King or James Herbert or Dean Koontz, whatever it was at the time. This was probably in the 80s, right in that sort of peak sort of horror sort of era. So I was always reading horror, and then I decided I wanted to be the next Stephen King. I wanted to be rich and famous and sit at home and write books. So from that point on, that's what I tried to do. And almost immediately I was trying to write novels, always novels, interestingly. I never really tried writing short stories. I think it was the canny Scot in me that thought you'll never make money off a short story, but you might make money off a book. So immediately I was trying to write novels. My mum and dad had this old word processor, one of these old ones that had this sort of green and black screen, massive sort of monitor, and I would sit typing on that, writing stories that were awful Stephen King knockoffs. So right from that age, that's all I wanted to be. And I continued to pursue it all through sort of school. I went to university and spent most of my time trying to write novels, thinking if I get published, I wouldn't have to finish doing my university degree and I can live the life of
That's a good way of getting out of it.
Good way of getting out of it. That didn't work. So I ended up having to get a job, which was this will pay the bills until I'm a rich and famous writer. And then 20 plus years later, I got published. So I got first published in 24, which is last year, with my first published book, The Book of Doors. And the book I think we're here to talk about is coming out next month, or this month, depending when this is released, is my second published book.
Yeah, it'll be this month when this airs. Yeah, August 12th, then it's the Society of Unknowable Objects, which we'll talk about in a minute. So that's a long runway and a lot of practicing. But when you did get picked up, the book went huge. The Book of Doors has been a massive success. So congratulations. That must be very satisfying that, okay, I wasn't really screwing around for this last 20 years. I did learn something.
Yeah, I mean, I went through the usual trad publication route of spending a long time trying to get an agent. And even when I got my agent, I was with my agent probably for a couple of years. And the book he signed me for didn't sell. And the book I wrote after that, we didn't submit because it was all about disease just as the pandemic was hitting. So nobody was going to buy that book at that time. Bad timing as ever.
Might be good now. You might be able to slide it in there now.
It's still in the bottom drawer. It's one of those that's still in the bottom drawer. It'll come out in 5 years probably. But yeah, so there was a third book I wrote, and I'd actually pitched him ideas. And one of them was the Book of Doors idea. And he said, write that one because it's a book about books apart from anything else. And publishing loves books about books. And he obviously judged it was of the moment, or it was on a trend, or whatever it is in publishing. And he was right, and it sold. Yeah, it sold really quickly, and it sold quite far. It sold to quite a lot of territories. So it's done really well. But I don't think I'd written a better book before that, and I think I needed, in hindsight, although I thought I was amazing at 22, as we all do, I think I needed the 20 years to be able to write that book. I wouldn't have written that book before then, I don't think. I think I have to be honest enough about that I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't good enough at my craft. There was things I was always good at, but there was other things I had to get better at, and I think it took me that period of time to live my life a bit to be able to write that book.
Maybe to complete the package, right?
Right, yeah. And I think that's fair for like a lot of people. Like, I mean, if you go back, very few people, that first book is amazing. Maybe the first book they publish is amazing. The first book they wrote is probably not. So
you do get those freaks of nature, that 25-year-olds who get the first book and they get their 7-figure deal. But quite a lot of those, I mean, from my observation, which is not necessarily robust, but quite a lot of those people don't sustain a career. It's almost like they've written an amazing book, but they don't necessarily have, it's not even about the work ethic, but they maybe don't have all the sort of the hard times to back it up, that when it's harder, you keep going. If you're gifted an amazing success with your first thing, I'd be like, well, this is amazing. I'm brilliant at this. It'll be easy. And then when it gets hard, I don't know what to do. So yeah.
I don't know. My first book was in 5th grade, and it was it's all just stapled together, and it was about a frog named Frisky. And
I would read that. I would read Frisky the Frog.
You probably should, yeah.
You're a brave man, Gareth. You're a brave man.
It's all handwritten, so you might not be able to read it.
So. Yeah. So just like the band, the second album, right? The sophomore album, you got to come out with another one. Now, were you already writing the second book when Book of Doors made it big?
So I had a 2-book contract, and I had different publishers in the UK and US, but they both had a 2-book contract. So I did that thing. So we sold Book of Doors in something like August 22, and it didn't come out till February 2024. So I had that, whatever that is, 18-month, 16-month period. And I'd written Book of Doors really quickly. I'd written in about 4 months. And I thought, I've just sold this book for lots of money. I'm brilliant at this. A bit like what I was just saying about the great success. So this is easy. Yeah. It's in 4 months. So I immediately, as soon as I had the contract, I'm the sort of person where I want the contractual burden off my back. I want to get the thing off my desk. I want to get it done. So I immediately cracked into writing another book. And this is, I suppose, the thing about learning, actually being a published author rather than just writing books for your own pleasure, is I didn't know what I was writing. So I was just typing words and constructing a story, and it just wasn't good enough. And I sent it to my agent, and he was like, no, it's not good enough. He didn't say that. He was much kinder than that. But that was the subtext, is no, this is not good enough.
That's good. Most of them aren't that kind. They're normally, no, this is just shit.
He's a Yorkshireman, so he's very straight talking, but he has got a heart, so he sort of softens the blow a little bit. And I think he was just telling me what I knew anyway. So I was sort of almost giving it to him as like, tell me this isn't good enough. And then I'd taken about 6 months to do that, and then I went away and thought, well, I'll have to have another go at it. So I wrote what became the Society of Unknowable Objects. But compared to Book of Doors, which is about 4 months of writing, the Society of Unknowable Objects was probably the best part of 10 months. It was a long, hard slog. And I probably wrote the best part of 300,000 words to get the 100 or so thousand words that the published novel is. And that's partly because I'm a pantser. I don't really plan things, so I kind of write as I go and discover.
That was going to be my question for you. So if you were writing it in 4 months the first time, or did you pants it or plot it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes things just work well and sometimes they don't, as is the case with the second one. But I think I was also trying to not repeat myself. So I was a little bit, the Book of Doors wasn't out yet, to go to your original question, but I was aware of how people were receiving it, and I was aware that there was all these contracts, and I didn't want to do the same thing again, although I wanted to be in the same wheelhouse because the publisher likes the same sort of wheelhouse. I didn't want to have the same sort of villain and the same sort of, so I was trying to make it a bit different, and I was just creating rods for my own back, I think, and I just hadn't given enough time to percolate in the brain. I was just trying to write it too quickly. So there is a learning thing there about life as an actual trad published author, the contractual deadlines and how you have to pace yourself, or at least I do have to pace myself and not start writing before I'm ready just because I want to get the thing done.
So interesting. So you're a pantser. Are you pure pantser? There's no notes. There's just sort of a mental picture or idea or something, and you sit down every morning and just start writing. So the book I'm working on now, I've actually a pitch for it, like a 3-page pitch, part of the new contract. And my agent encouraged me to do a pitch just to help me get the contract. And I was against it because I can't pitch. I don't have the muse. Things come to me as I'm writing, but I actually did it. We were away on holiday, and I did it over a week while we were on holiday. And that's actually given me quite a good structure. And I've actually found it's writing quite quickly. So who knew if you plan things out, it's easier to write? Nobody's told me this before.
Weird like that, isn't it?
But for Book of Doors and definitely for Society, I was just a complete pantser. I think you're always furiously planning in your head. It's not like you've got no plans. You're constantly, and I quite enjoy that. I like that sort of thinking about the plot when I'm doing the dog walk or whatever. But I love writing a book as if I'm reading it. I like discovering it, and I like the sort of rush of adrenaline you get when something connects that you didn't know would connect, or you do a really nice structure that works out in a way that you hadn't planned, and just almost like it was meant to be. It works out really well. I love that sort of discovery feeling, but it does make your life harder. Sometimes it works really well, like Book of Doors, but if it's not working, it is a real slog. And then you pray that you were a sort of planner, and you've got your bullet points, what you're going to do this day and all that kind of stuff. But so I think I do a bit of both, and I can see the merits of both. But I love the discovery. I love the making it up as I go and getting thrilled by a chapter that I didn't know was going to have the things in it that it does have in it.
I kind of with you on that one. I'm a little pantser plotter. I used to be full on pantser, but kind of like we said, and we've discussed this too. Like, is pantsing, even full on pantsers are always thinking about it. It's just I don't make notes. So this new book, The Society of Unknowable Objects, it comes out August 12th. You want to tell the listeners a little bit about kind of where that story came from? I mean, obviously you've been, is working on it, but you have a little thought.
If anybody's read my first book, The Book of Doors, they'll know, or from that one, they will have seen I like certain things. I like travel. always been a traveller, so Book of Doors contains a lot of different locations. Book of Doors was largely a sort of a New York set book, although there was lots of other locations. It was a New York set book, and I wrote that because it was during the later parts of COVID, and I just wanted to go back to New York, and I couldn't. So I sort of wrote vicariously, or I went back there vicariously through the characters. And then Society of Unknowable Objects, it was a bit the same. I've been to Hong Kong before, and I just wanted to go back to Hong Kong. I love cities. I wanted to go to Hong Kong and walk the streets and be sweaty and the humidity and all that kind of lovely stuff you do in a city. So I just thought, well, I'll just for no good reason, and it did cause me problems. I thought, well, I'll just set the book there. I'll just open the book in Hong Kong and I'll just set it there. And I just started writing with that. And so I think it's very much, for me, it's about experiencing a place I want to go or been to before and I want to go again, and using my writing to do that. And then I suppose the other elements of it, there's elements of sort of secret society and magical items. And I try and, I mean, interestingly to what you were saying at the start, is it is pitched as a sort of fantasy thriller, fantasy in the real world. I don't read a lot of fantasy either. I'm like you guys, I read thrillers and crime novels and all that kind of stuff. So I try and inject
and horror,
yeah, indeed. I try and inject a bit of the things I like to read. So I try and make the books, page turnery and compelling and have twists and all that kind of stuff. So it is fantasy, but hopefully with the sensibilities of a thriller that broadens its appeal. And certainly for Book of Doors, some of the reviews, people were saying, can't put it down, I want to keep reading. And that to me is the highest praise. A book that you can't put down, to me, is the best thing in the world.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You talk about locations. Hong Kong, I was in Hong Kong in the, mid-'80s, and I haven't been there since. But it is, at that time, certainly, and I'm sure it still is, I hadn't been to anywhere that had quite the same atmosphere and buzz as that city had. It was really unique. And like you said, it's hot, it's sweaty. We were there when it was really, really, I'd never been in that kind of heat before. It was amazing just walking through these little streets and the buzz and everything, all these little shops and stores. So, and that comes across in the book. You get that atmosphere as they're walking through and going to the noodle place and all that business. Is really, really good.
So you hadn't been in a while, so this was more of a revisiting, or did you go and kind of refresh your mind?
No, I hadn't been. I certainly have been to Hong Kong since I think we were there last. And my wife's from Malaysia, so we're over in that part of the world quite often. And I think it was maybe 2018 or 2019, maybe we were last there, just a few years before COVID, certainly. And I'd been there a few years before that. So I've been twice for a week each time. So it's not like I've got extensive knowledge of the city. I've only got that experience of being a sort of sweaty white Scotch person there.
It's really nice to see, like, when you get that immersive, and Nick and I both write kind of in different places, so it's always nice to have that immersive feel to it. And so you really kind of grasped it. And I'm just curious if you've been a lot of time kind of researching it by actually going, or you're just reflecting back on it at this point.
It's all from my memories. And same with Book of Doors. It was places, a lot of Book of Doors. So Book of Doors is about a magical book that can turn any door into any door, so you can travel anywhere you want to do. It's like delight for me, going anywhere with them to fly sort of thing. So there was a lot of places there, and for both that and for Hong Kong and Society, it was trying to remember how I felt about the place. It's more about the sort of the atmosphere and the mood and the sounds and the smells, and just trying to capture that. So it's very much just digging from my own memories.
And I know you said, like, it's kind of a fantasy, but like it does straddle genres. What do you consider it really? When you first sat down to write it, were you like, I'm sitting down to write a thriller that has, a door that takes you anywhere, or I'm writing a fantasy that has thriller elements in it? So
I never think of either of these two books as fantasy, although that's how they're marketed. Certainly in the UK, they're marketed as fantasy. I think in the US, they're slightly pushed more towards the thriller sort of, or certainly they're marketed more as thrillers. But I probably think of them as thriller adventure books. I don't really think majorly that they're fantasy, although there is obviously magic in them. It's very grounded in the real world with real people. And the fantasy in these books, it's just like, if it was another type of book, it would be a weapon or secrets. It's just a power. It's a power that drives the plot, and it's the MacGuffin sort of thing. So for me, what I come to them as is adventure, thriller books. That's what I think of them as.
I love that, Gareth, actually, because you're right. Unsurprisingly, as you wrote it. But immediately, because there's fantastical events, that the word fantasy kind of wants to be attached there, but it's not. And one of the notes I had down to say to you is that the story is so grounded in reality and a real life situation and real places. And then these phenomenal things start happening around that. So it's not like you're in this fantasy world of dragons flying and stuff like that. It's really grounded.
Yeah. And I don't read a lot of true fantasy. I've read Tolkien and I've read a few other things. My agent represents quite a lot of fantasy authors now, so I've read a few of the other authors. that he represents, but it's not my natural space, not because I don't like it, but I'd much rather read, like a Michael Connolly or Greg Iles, or for some reason I like a lot of American thriller writers. I don't read as many British ones, but I'm much more in that sort of space, or even Lee Child. I love a Lee Child book, just a book that you just can't put down, or an Ian Fleming, even the old Ian Fleming books in that same sort of space, where just an adventure, somebody against the odds, defeating the odds, and you want to know how it happens and all that kind of stuff. I love that sort of story.
So does that help guide how far you'll go on the fantasy side of things or the magical side of things? Does it gate you just a little bit? Not that it's restricted, because this has got some extreme magic stuff going on.
I don't think I think about that. I think it's probably more instinct. So I know I definitely wanted to be in the real world, and I know that I'll have certain rules that I'll establish at the outset. And as long as I'm following those rules and I'm not cheating the audience by, doing one thing and then because the plot needs it doing something else halfway through, I think you can get away with a lot that seems outrageous or fantastical as long as you ground it in absolute reality. So as you say, there's things in this book that are completely fantastical, but you can pull it off. I hope I can pull it off because of the grounding and the reality and the very mundane stuff that goes alongside it. And it's interesting that readers, so fantasy books are not read as widely as crime books or thriller books. Obviously, crimes and thrillers have got much bigger audiences. And there will be people who will not read a fantasy book or something that's described as a fantasy book. But if you put it in reality, the similar sort of fantastical things they will read because they will accept it. And I don't know if that's about, in a true fantasy book or in a true hard science fiction book, you need to learn about spaceships or magic systems, or, there's a whole new vocabulary sometimes where this doesn't have that. This gives you easy access to the adventure and the fantastic. And so grounding it, I think you can get away with a lot. And there's things that are extremely fantastical in these books, but it's certainly not the main focus. And it's used almost in a very mundane way sometimes. It's ordinary, greedy or hopeful people trying to make the best of a world that we recognise, and the fantasy is just a sort of a part of that.
Which definitely leads me into what I was going to talk about next, which is the main protagonist, which is Magda. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Magda Sparks, yeah.
Magda, okay, cool. She is as everyday, low-key, really someone you would pass on the street and not give a second thought to almost. And her character is really built that way. And then, of course, she's not. She's very unique. But I thought that was really cool. Actually, the whole collection of the characters in the bookstore are really that way. They're odd, they're quirky, but they're really everyday people, right? Yeah,
they're just ordinary people. And I think there's something about that maybe that speaks to me about, the hidden depths of the ordinary everyday person. In some ways they're quite privileged. So Magda's, an author. I mean, we know how wealthy authors are. Authors are hugely wealthy, obviously. But she's not wealthy because of her writing, but she's inherited quite a lot of wealth. So she's quite privileged, and she did a law degree, so she's not a stupid person. And then Will is a watchmaker. He runs a sort of a watchmaker business in a wealthy part of London. And then Henrietta is basically a dilettante with, a hidden life. And then Frank runs a bookshop and runs a secret society. So they're all quite sort of white, middle-class privilege, but they're essentially normal, quiet people who do this ridiculous thing of trying to hunt for magical items and keep them safe. And a bit like Book of Doors, where my main character was like a bookish introvert who suddenly discovers this magical item. I think maybe I like the idea of the quiet, introverted person having hidden depths and saving the world, because I'm a quiet, introverted person,
Got that little bit of a Kafka-esque kind of feel where like the everyday man's dragged into it. So
yeah.
That's kind of
it's
cool.
Interesting hearing you describe them as a sort of middle class white privilege, and that's funny. Obviously you're right. That's what they are, but they didn't come across that way at all. If I was asked, okay, where do they fit in society? I guess I'd forgotten some of the details about it, but they don't come across that way. They come across as very regular. Magda drew me in a lot. I love that kind of character, that unassuming, kind of unsure of themselves. I don't think I can do this. And then, when pushed, it's surprising what they can actually achieve. So let's talk about twists, because there's some twists in this book. There's some mega twists in this book. The one, which I can't talk about, obviously, because it gives it away, but it involves Magda, is truly like, whoa, what just went on there? So you're a pantser. Do you plan where this is going to happen? Did you know that was going to happen and you had to place it somewhere? Or did it just, in that scene, you went, oh, this is what's going to happen?
That particular twist was one of the things that I wanted to do right from the outset. And I knew it even before I knew how I would get to that point. And in fact, it created problems for me because I was determined to have this scene that follows that twist. And I kind of tied myself in knots trying to create the conditions to allow that scene to happen just because I wanted that scene. So that was just stupidity, basically. It was just like, I wouldn't sacrifice the sacred cow. I wanted that thing in there. But so some things are there from the outset, and I know I'm going to do this reveal at this point. Other things, and this is the joy of pantsing, I suppose, other things emerge quite organically as you're going along. Or I find it's quite useful to be just contemplating the plot, contemplating questions I don't have answers to. In fact, I was doing this last night when I was walking the dog about the book I'm writing just now. I had two problems with the plot. One problem about a character, another problem about sort of a chronology thing in the plot. And it just occurred to me that they could be two sides of the same problem. And I sort of revealed something just by thinking about those two problems, connecting them. And I love when that happens. You get a wee rush of adrenaline, like, ooh, I've just solved a wee problem, and that makes the book more interesting. So some of that is sort of planned in a loose way, and I know I'm going to do things at certain points, but I don't always know exactly how I'm going to get there. And some twists do arrive entirely organically. I do that slightly masochistic thing sometimes when I'm pantsing, where I will get to the end of a chapter and I'll think, what would surprise me if it happened now? And then I'll write that, and then have to work out if it holds up, and the next day I come back to it and I still like it, I then have to work out.
It's actually a great question to ask yourself when you get to that point. What would surprise me? What would shock me? And then you keep moving. So.
Yeah, I think you just have to bloody make it work. That's the problem. I mean, it's a great twist. Yes, how the hell did I do that? But sometimes it's worth it for the twist.
You've got a little bit more leeway in writing the kind of things you write with the magic and fantastical things. There are things that can happen that are way out there. When you're writing a thriller and a mystery, it's like it's got to be feasible. But I love the question. Love the question.
Feasible-ish, Nick. Feasible-ish. I like to push my bounds a little bit. So I've got a question, Gareth. Like you said, you basically cut out 200,000 words as you're writing this manuscript, right? Is that about right? Like, is that just like big chunks? Did you like take out entire plot lines, or was it like very strategic in how you did it?
So I didn't write a book that was 300,000 words long. It was more that I wrote and rewrote until I got what I wanted. So I never had a 300,000 word manuscript, but I would write things and it wasn't working and I would take it out. And then when I went back at the end and I looked at everything that I'd taken out, because I kept it, because obviously you don't throw anything out.
I was going to say, yeah, did you keep it? There's another question.
It was about 200,000 words, but it was mostly what it was I find antagonists really important, like the villains, and trying to find an interesting way. So in Book of Doors, I had this really evil person who just wanted to get all the magical things, it was give it all to me, and that was the main villain. And I didn't just want to do that again. I wanted to do something different. So trying to find exactly what that was took me a long time and lots of repeated attempts. And I would try and go down one path with a sort of conception of it, and I'd do 50,000 words and it just wasn't working or didn't feel right. So I'd start again. And I had 2 or 3 goes at that, I think, until I got what's in the final book. And then with what's in the final book, I overwrote it because I was trying to explore it, and I had lots of backstory and I had lots of point of view from the villain, which ended up not in the book, and ended up that just taking it out just to make it more concise and more elegant as a writing. So it was more drafting rather than writing a 300,000 page novel, drafting and rewriting and trying. The elements of it there right from the start, like some of the Magda stuff early in the book, that was largely unchanged other than your drafting improvements. The plots were the same. It was like almost one of the plot strands I had to keep rewriting until I would get it. And then there was sort of consequential impacts on other things that I then had to change. So it's more just working out what the plot was.
I can say you nailed it with the antagonist because you're sympathetic. I mean, you've got a lot of feelings for this character. I'm trying not to say things that give away the plot, but but really well done because it's you're really torn and throughout. I mean, right up to the end. So really, really well done with that. So fantastic. This has been brilliant. Great insight. And the new book, I guarantee, is going to be just as big a hit as the last one. It's a fantastic novel. A couple of questions we're going to end with. One thing that we ask everybody is, what do you think your author's superpower is?
That's an interesting question. I would rather get rubbish down and then edit it than make it perfect, line by line. I think for me, and maybe this is the superpower, it's ultimately plot, and I need to get the plot right. I need to get the structure and the shape of it. And if I can do that really quickly, I can go back and make the prose pretty and, the character arc and all that kind of stuff. So maybe it's pace, maybe it's speed, if that is a superpower. Speed and not getting hung up on the detail.
All right. We're going to wrap up. Doug has his wheel here, wheel of questions.
Our wheel of questions here. So
Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's random. Could be anything. Might be what you had for breakfast. Might be your social security number or your PIN number for your bank. So we never know. got a good spin on it that time, though.
He lubricated it.
I did. I actually did some repairs on it, but one of the things kind of broke on it. All right, so what's a writing rule that you secretly break, and why would you do it?
Well, the one I've definitely been accused of, and I know I do, is show, don't tell. There's this rule, you must show, you don't tell. And sometimes I want to tell, frankly. Sometimes it's more efficient to tell. So in the Book of Doors, I had a whole section where, sorry, this is a bit spoilerish if you haven't read Book of Doors, but there's a whole section where a character gets stuck in the past for 10 years. And now I could have written 300,000 words on her experiences over those 10 years, but the book wouldn't have been published. So I had to write, it's not quite as extreme as this, but I had to write a sentence which was, she was stuck in the past for 10 years. I mean, it's about 5 chapters, but in that there's a lot of concision that's necessary to get you through the plot. And particularly when I think you're writing a thriller where you're trying to get people through a story and the story is an engine. Show, don't tell is good advice, and you need to be able to know when to show and when to tell. But I think that show, don't tell thing is maybe more of a thing for literary fiction, where it's about, the stories about feelings, not to be overly dismissive of literary fiction, because I studied literature, but stories about feelings and emotions, where when you're writing plot and there's moments where it's okay to tell. It's the right thing to tell. And if somebody just goes through your book and says you're telling all the time, I'll say, well, sometimes the publisher has said to me, you need to cut that and be more concise, so I'll have to tell. There's all these different reasons why sometimes it's okay. And I feel like I'm defending myself now from all the trolls, but sometimes it's right.
I think you're right. I think because like thrillers, especially, they're very fast paced or hot, and if you read the structure of a lot of thriller novels, it's short sentence. I love short sentences because it keeps it's like fast. And sometimes you do kind of have to break that rule a little bit. I was just actually funny because I just was talking to my wife about this. I've started doing some short stories based on my main character, and she was making notes because she always reads all my stuff first. And her comment was, you didn't really expand. I said, well, this is a short story, not a novel. So I got to kind of compress everything in and get the same things into 10,000 words that I put into, 80,000 words. So I think there's a reason behind it. So.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between giving backstory and dropping it in there neatly and info dumping, right? That's what you don't want is to feel like an info dump. And at no point during the book I read of yours that I felt like I was eating it up, all the backstory, especially because of the characters and the way, again, not trying to give anything away, but the way the story's built is you want that. You're feasting on their backstories, so it's great. This has been fantastic, and best of luck with the release. It's going to be a hit again, and next time when you get your third book out, we'll get you back to talk about that.
I would love it.
All right, best of luck, Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. That was great.
Super guy, and the book is really cool, and it's not my genre, but you know what? What he talked about in genre, and he was like, and for a lot of people, especially when you write stuff that's in between, as the writer, I know as indie writers, we talk about know your genre, know your comps, and it's a very important marketing point of view. But ultimately, as writers, we don't give a flying what's it about genre.
We write what we want.
Exactly, yeah. And then you kind of figure it out afterwards. But he really touched on it, the fact that his story is a mystery, it's a thriller in parts. It just so happens to have magical elements to it.
I think that's the kind of cool thing about it. And as a writer, you can do all sorts of things. You can do sci-fi in space, could be in space. It could be a time travel. It could be a mystery. It could be a thriller. I mean, fantasy kind of works the same way. His kind of fall into more of an urban fantasy, but it's interesting how he blends that into a thriller at the same time. It's pretty impressive. And I think kind of gives you opportunity as a writer to realize there's really nothing holding you down. You can kind of do whatever you want to. So,
yeah, generally speaking, these days, if whatever you write, there is a niche that it'll fall under. It's pretty hard to write something that, unless it's just a big basket of mess.
That's kind of the beauty of where we are now. Like there is definitely, if you have something you like that you're into, you can find it. And, if you're like, I want Ted Lasso in space, you can write that and people would find it interesting.
Especially if you add romance to it.
Right. Well, romance.
Ted Lasso in space, romance. All right. Support the show on Patreon, folks. We're at patreon.com. The Two Authors podcast. And your kindness helps us cover the cost of bringing you the show. We really appreciate those folks getting on board. And we'll give a shout out to new subscribers, which we're backwards on recording these shows. So I think the next show we're going to record, we're going to shout out the latest Patreons. And then the next one, we'll record the ones that happened in between. So I know that's confusing as all shit.
But don't forget to tell everybody we've got the nuggets on there that you get a chance to. And Gareth stuck around, and we have a little nugget with him. So
yeah, we have bonus questions we're doing now from the interviews. Yep, little teasers. So don't forget to thank our friends at Vellum. Thank you so much for your support, folks at Vellum. Go to tryvellum.com/2authors is a good way of going there. Everything will be in the show notes, everything to our guest information. And we'll be back next week. It seems weird to keep saying that. Next week, instead of in 2 weeks. Next week with the next episode. So until next time, be cool to each other.
And fair winds and following seas.
You've been listening to the Two Authors podcast with Nicholas Harvey and Douglas Pratt. Subscribe on your favorite platform for new shows coming every week.